Hi, you're watching Reddit Shikstore, and if you're looking for a story that doesn't start with butterflies in your stomach and a happy ending, you've come to the right place. My name is Leo. For 28 years, I worked for a heritage science institute you've never heard of. We didn't restore paintings or statues. We restored time. My specialty was the forensic analysis of material decay. I could date a forgery by the polymerization of a single brushstroke of acrylic. I could tell you the climate of a room from the oxidation pattern on a century-old brass hinge. My tools were gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and electron microscopes. My purpose was to authenticate erosion. To prove that something was beautifully, honestly old. I was a tracer of fade. My wife, Clara, was the Institute's Director of Development. She was the alchemist who turned my graphs of molecular degradation into donor checks. Where I saw the elegant proof of entropy in a flaking pigment, she saw a story of enduring legacy and preserved beauty. She sold nostalgia as an investment. I proved the vintage, she marketed the bouquet. We were a perfect circuit. The authenticity and the auction. The contamination of our sample began with a new catalyst. His name was Julian Thorne. He was brought in as a public engagement innovator. He had a podcast about the aesthetics of time, a wardrobe of expensive tweed, and the smug, calm certainty of a man who believes his own press. He wanted to turn our chromatographs into NFTs and make our decay maps into immersive VR experiences. He called history the ultimate user interface. I observed the chemical change in her. Clara's language, once rich with genuine passion for preservation, began to polymerize into his slick jargon. Experiential patrimony, temporal liquidity, the democratization of decay. Their brainstorming sessions in his minimalist office stretched into evenings, then into weekends at industry retreats at modernist cabins upstate. The faint, comforting scent of old paper, solvent, and my skin that usually lingered on her was replaced by the aggressive, woody notes of his cologne, a compound I later identified as a cheap synthetic sandalwood base. The confirmation came through my own discipline. A flawed analysis. Clara had borrowed my tablet to check a donor list and left a browser tab open. It wasn't a love letter. It was a search history. A single, glaring query. Symbolism of lapis lazuli in Renaissance art plus fidelity. Lapis lazuli. Ultramarine. The most precious pigment, symbolizing divinity, truth, and in some contexts, marital faithfulness. She was trying to graft a layer of historical meaning onto their tawdry affair, to give it the patina of a masterpiece. She wasn't just cheating. She was attempting to create a provenance for a fake. The betrayal was in the forgery itself. The pain was not a shattering. It was a delamination. The bond between the varnish of our life and the substrate of truth had failed. A materials scientist doesn't weep when a sample proves fraudulent. He documents the exact nature of the fakery, isolates the anachronistic element, and determines the method of its application. Their affair was a collaborative restoration gone wrong. She was providing him access to the sacred, proven authenticity of our world. He was providing her with the thrill of spraying graffiti on a Rembrandt and calling it recontextualization. My correction would be a peer-reviewed dismantling. A conservation report on two fraudulent careers. Julian's value was his curated authenticity, his brand of deep connection to the past. I began a provenance search on the man himself. Before his reinvention as a public intellectual, had been a minor academic. I accessed old, paywalled university archives. His doctoral thesis, on Baroque theater, was unremarkable. But its bibliography was a fossil record. I cross-referenced every source. Buried in the citations was a pattern of over-reliance on a single, obscure monograph from 1972 by a Professor Ilara Vance. A deeper dive showed Julian's most original TED Talk arguments were near verbatim lifts from Vance's out-of-print work, repackaged without attribution. The original thinker was a plagiarist. I didn't send a cease and desist. I performed an act of restoration. I tracked down Professor Vance, now in her 80s and living in obscurity. With a grant I anonymously facilitated, a small university press reissued her seminal work. The launch event, which I subtly promoted in very specific academic circles, positioned her as a rediscovered genius. In the ensuing articles, sharp-eyed graduate students did what they do best. They connected the dots. The whispers started online, in the comment sections of his own podcasts. Isn't Thorne just repackaging Vance's theories from the 70s? His foundation, his original thought, began to look like a well-curated reproduction. Clara's power was her reputation for integrity, the broker who dealt only in genuine articles. I needed to introduce a reactive agent. I had long-standing credentials to the Institute's donor CRM, a system ID helped design for tracking artifact provenance. It was a simple matter to create a ghost in the machine. I introduced microdiscrepancies in the records of 3 major donors she was courting for a new digital fragility wing. For one, the preferred contact date was shifted by a day. For another, a noted interest in Asian lacquerware was accidentally tagged to pre-Columbian artifacts. Tiny, correctable errors that suggested a lack of meticulous care. Then, I orchestrated a benign collision. Using an anonymized email, I sent a query from a fictional junior curator at a partner museum to our institute's head archivist. Preparing for the joint symposium and cross-referencing donor profiles. Noticing some small data conflicts in the files for the Bremer and Lee accounts that Clara's team manages. Could we sync up to ensure our records are pristine? The question was innocent, but in a world built on flawless detail, it was a hairline crack in her professional glaze. Their joint masterpiece was the Chronos Chamber, a multisensory room where donors could experience the decay of a masterpiece in minutes, watch colors fade, cracks propagate. It was powered by an algorithm that simulated material stress. An algorithm whose core degradation models were built on my lifetime of research. A week before the unveiling for the biggest patrons, I accessed the simulation's core. I didn't break it. I refined it. I recalibrated one variable. The environmental humidity parameter. A fractional adjustment. At the grand reveal, Julian, with Clara at his side, selected Van Gogh's sunflowers for the simulation. Watch, he intoned, as time teaches us the beauty of impermanence. The screen swirled. The vibrant yellows began to dull, but not evenly. Muddy browns bloomed in chemically implausible ways. The simulated canvas warped in a manner indicative of a cheap, acidic backing board, not professional preservation. The algorithm, using my corrected data, wasn't showing poetic decay, it was showing negligent ruin. A esteemed conservator from the Getty, present as an honored guest, stood up, pale. "This isn't a simulation of time," she said, her voice cutting the hushed room. "This is a simulation of malpractice. Is this what you think our work is?" The room, full of people who paid millions to fight that exact decay, went cold. Clara's grand narrative of embracing fade suddenly looked like ignorance masquerading as philosophy. Julian's beautiful metaphor was exposed as a technical failure. The board demanded a review. In the meeting, where I consulted on the technical error, I simply played 2 audio clips. The first, from a donor dinner recording. Julian laughing, saying, "Authenticity is just the story that lasts the longest." The second, a clipped phrase from Clara's voicemail to me years ago, edited to starkness, "That we have to sell the story they want, the truth is often too fragile." The board heard not a personal betrayal, but a professional one. A fundamental contempt for the truth we were all sworn to uphold. Julian was dismissed for gross misrepresentation of the Institute's scholarly standards. Clara was offered a choice. A public inquiry into the donor data irregularities and the Chronos Chamber fiasco, or a silent, immediate resignation. She resigned. She sits now in our living room, a space I designed for calm. She is a preserved specimen. The woman who sold stories of enduring legacy now spends hours watching the slow, real fade of light on the wall. She believed she was betrayed by a fraudulent man and a cowardly institution. She looks to me, her steady husband who understands the inevitability of decay, for comfort. They loved the idea of the past, she whispers, until it demanded something real. I hand her tea. No, my dear, I say, my voice as quiet as the hum of a spectrograph. They loved the forgery. I just published the authenticating report. And I did. I didn't create the flaw. I merely applied the correct test, under the right conditions, and documented the inevitable failure. Now, I maintain the controlled environment of our life. The humidity is perfect. The light is diffuse. And the silence is so complete, so archival, that you can hear the true, final reading. The sound of a vibrant composition, now officially catalogued as a period piece, beautiful, static, and forever finished.